And thanks to Bunker 51 in Greenwich for releasing Jamie Rubin in time for the show. He's with me now. Welcome back.
Thank you.
Now, you said that the White House should be stopping Putin. Stopping him from what and how?
Well, first of all, it wouldn't be beyond the capabilities, I think, of the United States to have counteracted all this interference in the U.S. election, in the French election now, in the German election. We keep hearing about Russia's effort to damage our democratic system. It wouldn't be impossible for the United States to have responded stronger to Ukraine in the past, and I certainly don't think we should ignore the fact that Russia has invaded another country. The thing about Trump, all the rest, I don't know what really happened, but I cannot figure out why he can't criticize this invasion of another country. You don't have to be for sanctions to criticize it.
Sure, but
why can't you do that? And that's troubling.
But wasn't it Mr. Obama's job to stop Russian interference in the election? He was the president at
Well,
the time.
I certainly would agree that it's now apparent that President Obama and his team should have been tougher on the Russians. Every time the Russians interfered, there was no response. There was no response.
So that's not
Ukraine.
Donald Trump's fault.
Well, it's Donald Trump's fault for not recognizing this as a problem. It's Donald Trump's fault for not telling us we need to all gather together, work in unity. The reason why the United States and the West succeeded in all those years is when we were together and we were united and we agreed on the problem. Right now, Germany, Britain, France, they don't agree with the United States on Vladimir Putin. Nobody can figure out why Mr. Trump is so calm about Putin's activities.
What's wrong with trying to reset relations with Russia?
I don't think there would be anything particularly wrong about that. I just want to go back over, where we've been. Ukraine was, Crimea was invaded by Russia when Obama was the president. And Putin predicted that there would be no reaction from Obama, and he was dead right, there was no reaction from Obama. I think actually the invasion of Crimea was largely provoked by European Union foreign ministers who were interfering in Ukraine and presented either a threat or an excuse to Russia. The fact is that since Trump has become president, nothing has happened. There may have been an absence of language that you would have welcomed, but nothing has happened. Except for two things, which is that he's declared that he's going to increase defence spending, and he's told his European Union, NATO partners, quite rightly, that they should increase their defence spending because they are freeloading on the United States in Europe, and that message has been delivered much more strongly by Trump than it was ever delivered by Obama. So if one's going to talk about what the President has said, it's true that there may have been an absence of Cold War rhetoric, but it's also true...
No, it's not Cold War rhetoric.
But it's also true that he's done two things which actually are to the disadvantage of Russia.
Well, Michael, I sure hope that your comfort level with Donald Trump sustains itself throughout these years. But you dismiss as Cold War rhetoric the idea that the President of the United States should declare with vigor and determination that a country in Europe should not invade its neighbor and annex a portion of it. That's still going on right now, Michael. It's not just something that happened years ago. There's a war in Ukraine. You may have missed it.
What could America do about that?
Well, he can declare that it's a problem. The fact that he can't criticize the Russian invasion of Ukraine is what's troubling me. The things you said are fine. Yeah. I have no trouble with increasing defense. But to dismiss that as Cold War rhetoric, you don't understand.
Let me just say one
thing. No.
No.
I need to hear from this. What's your take on this?
Come back to your question with what's wrong with it. If you take Trump at his word about what he wants to achieve, actually in many cases Russia wants the opposite. Trump says he wants to defeat so-called Islamic State. In Syria, Russia has actually been not fighting Islamic State, it's been fighting the rebels against Assad. Trump wants to contain China. Russia is too weak politically, economically, militarily to do that, and actually wants to boost trade with China because of its struggling economy. And also, another objective might be to kind of confront Iran. And again, all the evidence is that Russia is working with Iran in the Middle East. Russia's primary objective is to divide and undermine the confidence of the West, and ultimately that'll be bad for Trump. So the truth is, his strategic objectives, even as he set them, won't be achieved by cozying up to Putin.
But does Mr. Trump thinks that Russia is largely Europe's problem. It's a regional issue. He sees China now as the threat to US interests. He thinks Europe should sort out Russia. It's their problem.
Well, I don't know that he's made that judgment, but I would disagree on the following grounds. Russia's behavior in the last few years is a problem for the world. When a great power decides to throw away 50 years of policy and invade their neighbor and annex a piece of it, whether you think Crimea should have been Russians or not, the last great power to do that, we all know, was Germany. Okay, so it's a problem. It's not maybe the end of the world, but to not identify it as a problem, that's where my problem is.
But he thinks
Trump.
it's Europe's problem.
No, but it's the world's problem. The basic rule to not invade your neighbor and annex part of it is the basic rule of international relations. If you don't accept that, we've got big problems. Then you go to Syria and Iran. If it hadn't been for Russia working with Iran, the Assad regime would never be where it is today. That's bad for the whole world to stand by and watch Syria do what it did, and for the United States to cede the Middle East to the Russians. We're going to be sorry someday. So, look, it's not a regional problem. When Russia interferes with our election, with your elections, yours, European elections.
None of this happened on Trump's watch.
No, it's happening today. It's happening every day.
Crimea didn't happen. Ukraine didn't happen. The election didn't happen.
Interference in Germany and France is happening today. Russian policy in Syria is happening today. Russian planes are interfering with NATO officials across northern Europe today, and we may have an incident in the Baltics tomorrow. For you to dismiss this as ancient history, I think is not serious.
But no, I'm not dismissing it as ancient history. I just can't believe that the man who supported President Obama for the last 8 years, and remember, President Obama has only just left office, can come here and, via us, lecture President Trump. What is
You're talking about me?
Yeah, I'm talking about you.
Then you haven't been listening to me.
I have been listening to you.
Michael, let me be as clear as I can. You just declared me the man who was Obama's supporter for 8 years. I said in the piece, and I hope you were paying attention, I said that George Bush overreached through the invasion of Iraq. And then I said that President Obama underreached and retrenched in the United States. And that what we need is somewhere in the middle. So please don't dismiss me as an Obama lover who's suddenly criticizing Trump. Listen to what I said on the tape. I think Donald Trump is bad for us because we need somebody in the middle. We don't want to overreach. We don't want to underreach. We should just be the leader that the world needs right now.
Well, I have a feeling that Trump may turn out to be exactly what you
I hope so.
desire, which is something in the middle. And certainly the two things that he'd said, which I've already alluded to, the extra spending and telling NATO to get its act together, would push us in that direction.
I mean, the Americans think it's time Europe paid more for its own defence. As Secretary of Defence Mattis said, you can't expect Americans to care more about the future of European children than the Europeans do.
Well, I've been, a strong supporter of Britain and the other NATO countries paying what they have promised to pay. I think that's absolutely right.
Mrs. Merkel says she's not going to reach 2% until 2024.
Well,
even though she runs a massive budget surplus and a massive balance of payments.
I think if you make a commitment as part of NATO or any organisation, you should meet it. But what I don't think will help make the world safer is to kind of engage in as his announcements this week, in some kind of unnecessary and quite frankly dangerous nuclear arms race. I don't think in cutting funding for the State Department and foreign aid, he could actually be reducing America's influence in the world and making states less safe. So, and it also raises big questions for the UK, because, we used to be a leader in Europe and a bridge between Britain and Europe. Now we're neither.
Well, hold on, the Europeans will need us more than ever now.
They will on the defence side.
We're the only other military power that matters in Europe.
On the defence side, but let me say this, our objectives are also different. This is actually a point John Major made in his speech. We want to contain Russia and engage China, and Trump wants to, engage Russia and contain China. We have very different objectives on trade, on refugees. We have a different view about protectionism. And I think this is going to put us in an extremely difficult position if Theresa May believes that, having a much, much closer relationship with Trump is going to be the solution to all of our problems.
Let me finish off and ask you, Jamie Rubin. Surely the fact that Mr. Trump, he wants to take a tougher line with China That's been quite clear. That means he can't really be seen to be too soft on Russia, because Beijing will see that as a sign of weakness.
Look, what you say on its surface is fair enough. The problem is Donald Trump doesn't know what he thinks. One day he was making a phone call to the president of Taiwan saying, I reject the one China policy that's been the basis since Richard Nixon and Henry Kissinger started relations with China. And the Chinese did what they always do, say, oh, if that's your position, we don't really want to talk to you. And so Donald Trump capitulated. And he had to agree to the one China policy before the president of China would even get on the phone with him. This is amateur hour in the extreme. And you can find all the silver linings you want, but when an amateur takes over in the White House at a time when American leadership is so important, after 8 years of going one way and 8 years of going the other, it's a real danger for the world. That's what I'm worried about. Okay. Amateur hour at the White House.
Jamie Rubin, thank you.
Thank you.
And thanks to Bunker 51 in Greenwich for releasing Jamie Rubin in time for the show. He's with me now. Welcome back.
Thank you.
Now, you said that the White House should be stopping Putin. Stopping him from what and how?
Well, first of all, it wouldn't be beyond the capabilities, I think, of the United States to have counteracted all this interference in the U.S. election, in the French election now, in the German election. We keep hearing about Russia's effort to damage our democratic system. It wouldn't be impossible for the United States to have responded stronger to Ukraine in the past, and I certainly don't think we should ignore the fact that Russia has invaded another country. The thing about Trump, all the rest, I don't know what really happened, but I cannot figure out why he can't criticize this invasion of another country. You don't have to be for sanctions to criticize it.
Sure, but
why can't you do that? And that's troubling.
But wasn't it Mr. Obama's job to stop Russian interference in the election? He was the president.
Well, I certainly would agree.